Welcome everyone to our webinar on proven strategies for selling to multiple stakeholders. We will get started in just a moment. We're waiting for folks to join the Zoom. So in the meantime, as you are joining, please drop in chat. Let us know your name and where you are joining from. We're excited to share this topic with you today. Look forward to hearing from you.
Going to be a good day, Michelle.
It is going to be a fabulous day, Shelley. We're going to have so much fun with this
Yay.
group, and we've got folks joining.
Awesome.
While folks are also joining, just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, and we will share it with everyone who registered. So again, as you are joining, please let us know your name and where you're joining from. And Shelley, we have got folks from all over.
All over. Look at that. Alberta, Canada.
I
Hey.
know. I know. North Carolina, probably
Yay.
right down the road from us.
Right? Representing.
Back? Absolutely. Welcome,
Austin,
everyone.
Texas. I want to go to Austin, Texas.
I will be there next week, so it is a
Nice.
fabulous city. Yes.
Lucky you.
Yes. All right. So again, as you are joining, please let us know your name and where you're joining from. This webinar will be recorded, and we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. So again, welcome everyone. Our topic today, proven strategies for selling to multiple stakeholders. We are going to be talking about how to navigate, how to understand, navigate, and win over a buying committee. We've got all kinds of tips and strategies for you. We're going to talk about gaining access to stakeholders, building trust with your advocates, how to deliver value at every interaction, avoiding those common mistakes and differentiating against competitors. And I am thrilled to be joined by Shelley Burkhart, our Director of Sales Effectiveness here at the Brooks Group. Shelley brings a ton of sales experience. If you are one of our clients, you may have enjoyed training with Shelley, so you know you're in for a treat. Welcome, Shelley.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm excited to be here. It's a great topic to dive into.
I know, and I know as we've been preparing for this, I know you have got some great tips, things that you have learned, lessons learned from your own sales career, some stories to really help bring this topic alive for our audience today.
I sure do.
All right, we're going to jump in and also want to just put out to our audience, please, we want to hear from you. It will be much more interesting if we can hear from you. Please drop your comments, your questions in the chat. We will take questions as they come up. And so we look forward to hearing from you and interacting as we go through our content today. So first of all, let's talk about the buying landscape. We know things have changed. Obviously, this is a hot topic. The number of stakeholders involved in buying decisions has grown, and it is a challenge that we hear from our clients all the time. So we recently did a survey to our client base, and we asked them some questions around selling to buying committees to multiple stakeholders. So we asked them, what is the biggest challenge that sellers are facing when they're selling to buying committees? And you can see the top four right here on our screen. So gaining access to all stakeholders, that was the number one answer. More than half, 54%, indicated that this was a primary challenge. Influencing stakeholders that our sellers can't directly meet. This feels like a challenge that is increasing. So 37% said that was a challenge. Gaining alignment with all stakeholders at 35% and differentiating against competitive offerings, about a third said that. And we also found that 50% of our clients are selling to buying groups of about 3 to 5 stakeholders. About 12% are selling to 6 to 9 stakeholders and 4% more than 10. So Shelley, what are your thoughts on this? Are you surprised by this at all?
Not at all. There's more and more people we have to get to know. And we'll say there's more friends we need to make.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And it's so important that we do our homework. This is all preparation.
Yes.
We talk a lot about this in our sales training about being prepared. And this is one of those steps that we just got to try to touch as many people as we can and bring in those advocates.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think that the buying committee just adds that additional level of complexity. Um, it can potentially lengthen the sales cycle as well, particularly if you're influencing people that you
Yeah.
can't directly meet, if your sellers
Right.
can't directly
Right.
meet. So there's implications for sales skills. So you mentioned, we talk about this in sales training. There's implications for sales skills as well as for managing and coaching your sellers when they are in these types of situations.
100%. And when we can instill that, when we do that, investigate that discovery, when we really dig deep and
Mhm.
look at the mapping, and I know we'll talk about that in a little bit, but really look at who's has decision making power and who could be our advocate and how can we bring value to them at every touch point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you raise a really good point about kind of pre-call planning and that discovery. So it does, I think, require, or certainly if someone can do a little bit more due diligence up front, asking better questions, really trying to understand the overall organization, they're going to be much more successful down the road.
100%.
Yeah,
And let's face it, oftentimes we don't want to do the homework, you
yeah,
know? We just
yeah,
want to go right to the meat. We
right.
just want to meet them and woo them over. But when we are diligent with really doing that homework and trying to discover who we can connect with, whether it be on LinkedIn or getting recon from your advocates that you're going to be better positioned once you get into that meeting.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to talk even more about how to leverage those advocates
Yeah.
and doing that recon, as you said. So, as you said, really understanding the lay of the land, understanding those organizational dynamics. I think that's the first step in building those relationships and successfully selling to multiple stakeholders. So this is one of the most important things that sellers can do. You alluded, Shelley, to
Yeah.
mapping the organization, mapping the
Right.
stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
If they're not doing that, if your sellers are not doing that, they absolutely should be, whether it's in your CRM or on a piece of paper, making note cards, right? That can even be
Yes.
helpful as well.
That's a great visual, Michelle. In one of our programs, we actually take note cards and we
Yes,
whiteboard it and we can
and move.
see. It's a
Yes,
great
yeah,
visual. And it's a great
yeah.
visual of who do I know and who don't I know?
Right, right. Absolutely. Very tactile. It's a great way to really kind of put together the pieces and understand the stakeholders. And with that, I mean, some things you need to be thinking about, your sellers should be thinking about who actually influences those buying decisions, right? So we're talking about stakeholder mapping. Do you know who actually is part of the buying decision and who has influence?
Right.
Our survey indicated that less than half of our respondents are consistently able to identify all of the stakeholders or decision makers in the buying kind of the buying process before they present a solution. So less
Yeah.
than half actually understand or know who
Yeah.
all of the stakeholders are.
Right. 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 It's tough. It's tough to really know. But again, if we go back to just doing that homework and really, I'll say landscaping or mapping it out,
Yeah, yeah,
it's very eye-opening. You'll be able to tell who you know and who don't you know.
right, right. And which stakeholders do people trust or go to for informal advice? So I think there's a tendency to rely on, as sellers, we go, okay, well, this is the official org chart. So if this person has a VP title or a C-level title or something like that, maybe they have the ultimate influence. Maybe not. There could be
Right.
others in the organization who informally have um, more credibility and more influence.
Sure.
Who might resist change, right? So are there folks
Yeah.
in the organization who may not be as vocal as others, but can be undercutting the decision.
Right. And that's tough. And I know we'll touch on behavioral styles, but we know there's some behavioral styles that are really resistant to change.
Yes,
And
yes,
if we can identify them, then we'll know, who are the folks that we really need to show value, bring
right,
value to.
right. You're right. And understanding kind of the behavioral style makeup of the buying committee members, those stakeholders can be immensely helpful for how
Yeah.
you present your solution, how you communicate value, right? And on that note, who favors your solution? Who favors your competition?
Yeah.
So basic questions here to really understand the organizational dynamics, who's involved, how that decision is made, and kind of who's for you, who might be working against you. So super important in understanding and just again figuring out kind of the lay of the land within that account.
These are all
These
great,
are
great questions.
Yeah, and great questions for managers to be asking sellers from a coaching perspective. So if as a manager out there, if you are not asking your sellers these questions, highly recommend that you do. Other thoughts on these before we move on, Shelley?
When I look at this, sometimes I can, we can ask these questions, of course, if we have an internal advocate. But sometimes if we're on LinkedIn and we're following somebody on LinkedIn, you could see who they follow. You could
Right.
see if, they're following the competition, they're commenting on something the competition posts. There's a
Yeah.
lot of intel there that you can go to that's right at our fingertips. So oftentimes that's my go-to if I want to figure out, like if someone's posting, if they post a lot and I look
Mhm.
at the content they're posting, you can get an idea of what they value.
Yeah, that is a great point. Use all of the resources that are available. Sellers should be using all of those resources.
Yeah.
Obviously, asking questions of their advocate and doing their an effective sales job within the account. But to your point, LinkedIn, online sources like that can also give you clues
Hmm.
beyond maybe what they will reveal during a sales call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I'm curious for our audience, do you see your sellers, or if you are a seller yourself, are these questions that resonate with you, that you see your salespeople, can they answer these? Or are there additional questions that you would encourage sellers to think about as they're really trying to understand the organizational dynamics within an account? Drop us a line in the chat and let us know.
Yeah.
So identifying stakeholder gaps. So we've talked about or understanding the organizational dynamics, doing some mapping, trying to figure out, everybody that is involved in the decision process. Um, that's likely going to lead to identifying where you have gaps in people that you know. So here are some key questions to ask salespeople as managers. Ask questions around these topics. Are we missing higher level contacts? Right? Or is there, yeah, I mean, is everybody's, are the seller's contacts, is everybody at like a mid level or, an individual contributor level, or are they missing any, you have representation from senior
Yeah.
leadership?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I always believe the more contacts, the better, right?
Yes,
Because those
exactly.
contacts can often get you to that higher level decision maker.
Exactly. Yes. And you're insulated if your key contact leaves, you've got more contacts within the account to continue the
Right.
decision. Yeah. Yeah. Who are advocates versus adversaries? So we've talked a little bit about advocates and those who, who's for us, who might be against us.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to keep in mind, if there's a lot of change that's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen, if they use you as providing a solution, that could be someone's pain point.
Yeah.
That could be something they're like, you know what? Same old is good in my boat.
Yeah. Exactly,
So we have to
exactly,
be aware of that.
exactly. Why are they adversaries? Are they resistant to change? Do they favor a competitor?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, really dig into that a
Yeah,
little bit
Sean,
more.
Sean in the chat had he agrees. Why do they favor the competition? Like that's
Yeah,
something we need to understand. Like, and you know, this is we also, you know, within the sales process, we have to know the competitor
right,
really, really well. And when we
right,
do, that's just going to give us more information to figure out
right.
why somebody could really lean to the competitor. What value
Yeah,
are they bringing that maybe the adversary doesn't understand that we can bring as well?
right, right, right. That is a great coaching question, Sean. Thank you for dropping that into the chat. We should be understanding who we're competing against and why. Why do they favor the competition? And if you don't know, ask.
Yeah.
You know, it can't hurt to put that question out there.
Right. But I always
Yeah.
like to know what do they like about their current vendor and what don't they
Hmm.
like?
Right. And I like that, Shelly, because that's a good balance. You understand, you're not sticking to just the negative of
Right.
what do you not like,
Yeah.
but help me
Yeah.
understand, right?
Yeah.
That gives you a really good sense of what they value and what they're looking for
Mhm.
in a provider. I think on the advocates as well, advocates can be the most important stakeholder, at least early on in the sales process, because this is the person that is going to argue, sell on your behalf, is
Sure.
going to feed you intelligence about the account. So your advocates can be one of your most valuable contacts within the account.
Yeah.
And 61% of our survey respondents indicate that they sometimes or rarely develop more than one advocate. So a piece of advice would be develop as many advocates as you can. Encourage your sellers, coach your sellers to develop as many as they can, rather than just relying on one.
100%. And you know, and knowing why that the advocate values what you have to offer is huge.
Yeah,
Right. So I know when I being in media sales, I called on a lot of car dealerships and oftentimes I would just talk to the guys and the gals on the sales floor and I
yeah,
would get the temperature of what was going on. And of course, if my advertising campaign could bring in more foot traffic or leads, that would affect their pockets, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I was able to make advocates and then just get more intel at every touch point.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a great point. Um, Look for advocates, develop advocates, as many as you can, and ideally at all levels within the organization. And then are there any departments or business units where we don't have contacts? So are we missing, particularly, if you're trying to go kind of deeper and wider within an organization, maybe you're in one business unit and you're trying to get broader. Are there departments where we don't have contacts already? Um, and if it's an existing account, maybe also think about, are there others within your organization that might have contacts that you don't have, like
Right.
finance and accounting and that kind of thing.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Sometimes we have to have a sticking in our silo, and then we want to go a
Exactly.
little wider. It's going to open our eyes to other people that may be able to help us.
Right, right. So leverage other folks within your organization, other team members that can help bolster the relationships within the account. It's interesting. We have a comment in the chat.
Yeah,
Ian said that he tries to avoid using the terminology of higher level contacts because it may discredit or devalue the point of the contact or champion that you may be
sure.
speaking with. Um, who else may have a vested interest in learning more about XYZ? How will they be involved in the decision process? I
Yeah,
agree. Like, I think those are great questions to be asking for sure. And that is a great way to phrase that type of question when you are talking about advocates. I would say when you're asking these questions here that we're talking about, on the screen, are we missing those higher level contacts? Those should be kept internal. So we
right.
don't necessarily want to go to an advocate and go,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
yeah,
right?
I'd like to get higher than you.
Yeah,
Maybe it
who's
is. Who
higher than
else?
you?
Right. Right. Yes. You want to phrase that in a in a more, I don't want to say delicate, maybe that's not the right word, but you watch the phrasing there. I think that is
Yeah,
a great point. Thank you for
yeah.
making that comment.
And you know, Sean, I like what Sean just says. He says, I ask, who else do I need to meet? Ask them to introduce you to others in the building or bring someone to lunch or have them
Yeah.
go to lunch with you. You know, I read a Harvard Business Review and the stat made sense to me. Over 90% of professionals are willing to introduce others, make that introduction and share expertise to help somebody out.
Yeah.
So think about it.
Yeah.
90% of people want to help people out. They want to help you
Exactly.
make a connection. And
Yes.
and so we can't be afraid to ask. You know, that's our
Use
job
it.
in sales, right? Asking, that's
Right.
what we do. So 90% of people want to help. So if we just ask, you know, chances are they're gonna help make that connection for you.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And I think that is a great stat, Shelley. Again, sometimes we get, as sellers, your sellers may kind of get caught up in, well, I don't want to ask. They
Right.
might say no. Well, what's it going to hurt?
Exactly.
What's it going to hurt to ask? And that obviously depends on the relationship with your advocate. And so that's what we
Sure.
want to talk about now is how do you develop those advocate relationships? How do you build trust with your advocates such that they are willing to introduce you around. They are willing to sell on your behalf. They are willing um, to be that champion for you.
Yeah.
So you want to position yourself as a strategic partner early in the process,
Right.
and understand their why, know their why. So this needs to
I
be a
think that's
a
one of the
deep
most important
relationship.
things.
Yeah,
Yes. I think that's one of the
absolutely.
most key things. We have to understand why it's important to them. Like,
Hmm.
is it going to help them accelerate their career? Is it going to help them look better? What is their why? And
Right.
we need to continue to speak to that and make sure that our solution um, helps them when it comes to what their true why is.
Hmm. Hmm. Again, another great coaching question for our managers. What is their why? What are the wants and needs of your advocates? I think you are 100%. This is a two-way relationship. This is your advocate stands to gain something. What is it that they're going to get out of this? What is their why, right? You obviously are going to, as a seller, your sellers are going to get something out of it, but what's in it for your advocates as well?
Right.
And then Shelley, I know that
Ah.
this one is like a hot button for you. So let's park here for a
Ah.
minute. Provide value at every interaction. Don't simply check in.
Oh,
What is
check
about this one?
in. Hey, just call to check in or sending that check-in email. I mean, that is just, no, we don't do that. At every touch point, we bring value and we build trust, right? What that looks like to me is, um, hey, I was reading this article and I thought of you. Does this pertain to your business? Send over the article. Maybe that person, maybe their love language is data, stats, and like you, Michelle.
Like me, right?
Like
Right?
yeah, your
Yes.
love
Let's
language,
just say
right?
it. Like me,
And if
right?
my research department sends me something that I'm like, you know what? I think that Bradley would dig this. I'm going to send
Yeah.
it to him.
Yep.
You know, so
Yeah.
we've got to continue to bring value and trust. That's what's going to separate us because we don't check in. You know, that's annoying.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Every touch point should bring value, and
Right.
every touch point should help build that relationship. And again, something more than check in,
Yeah.
right? Talk to me about, as you're working to build trust with your advocates and kind of strengthen that relationship. What about the cadence? How do you set this up so that you keep things moving along
Yeah.
with the deal or an opportunity, but you're also building trust?
Right. Well, you know the saying, time kills all deals, right?
Yeah,
So we've got to have a cadence. You know, you can't just reach out to your advocate and try to get some intel and bring some value and then 3 weeks later hit them up again. You know,
right.
we've got to have a cadence so you are top of mind Because let's face it, in business and in our world today, we are hit so many different ways. Phone, email, text messages, messages on social
Mhm.
platforms, that we have to be the ones that are consistent. Because when we're consistent, it shows that we truly do care. It shows that we firmly believe we could help them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I believe that when you have a consistent cadence and you're bringing value, that advocate is going to see that.
Yeah. So in other words, we're not just following up at the end of the month because we're waiting for it to close. We're just keeping
Right.
regular check-ins
Yeah.
with something, not check-ins, but you don't put that in your email, just checking in, but regular touch
Right.
points.
How can I
Um,
help you? A lot of times I'll say,
right.
how can I help you? Is there anything you don't understand? Is there anything I can clarify?
Yeah.
How can
Yeah.
I help you? I had a client that we were presenting another strategic campaign in marketing, and he
Yeah.
was having a hard time getting his head wrapped around some of the analytics.
Hmm.
And I said, "What? Let's do a deep dive. Let's schedule like 30 minutes and bring whoever needs to be in the meeting so you get a full understanding of what this data truly means to you." I was
Love
bringing
that.
value.
Yeah. Yeah. So really just making sure that you are, just to summarize, your scheduling or having regular touch points, there is a purpose, a business purpose
Yeah,
to that conversation, and you're bringing value. So whether that's sharing an article or a resource or something
yeah,
like that, or answering questions, taking a deep dive into
yeah.
maybe questions they have about your offering or something like that. But um, there is an intention behind it that
And
brings
and
value.
I'm sorry, another thing Michelle was thinking, this happened to me just the other day. My internal advocate was having a meeting with her sales manager.
Uh-huh.
And I said, would it be okay if we just connected quickly, like 15 minutes right after your meeting? Because I'm really curious about what was said.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's great. Because I know that her day gets crazy and it would
Hmm.
be top of mind for her. So we scheduled like a quick connection, and she was she gave me the pulse of where things were
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. Which I think is a great point of scheduling the next meeting,
Right, right.
right? So you're moving it forward, you have a purpose, and it's on the calendar. And
Yeah.
again, you're bringing value. Yeah. Love that. So let's talk about presentations. So when you're presenting or your sellers are presenting to a committee or a buying group, so that's one scenario, or you might have to rely on your advocate or advocates to sell on your behalf. So we kind of have two
Right.
scenarios there
Yeah.
in terms of presenting to committees. Um, we want to identify behavior and communication styles. So we mentioned that kind of at the beginning of the
Yeah.
session, like different styles have different ways they want to receive information, different preferences. So talk to me about that. How is this? What advice do you have for our audience around that
Yeah.
piece?
Well, for those of you that know behavioral styles and know DISC, this is the common language that we use that helps streamline communication. So if we know that someone is an I, oftentimes we're gonna have to be a little more animated when we present.
Hmm.
They do value that. Someone that's a D, that's more direct, they're going to want information straight to the point, and they're all about results. So,
Yeah,
what part of your presentation can you really highlight the results that you're going to bring, and make sure that person understands that?
yeah,
We talk about our steady behavioral style, that person that sometimes they're resistant to change, and so a lot of times I'll coach sellers, if you know somebody's in the room with that, you may have to really point out that your solution is turnkey. It's easy. And then with our
minimize the change. Yep.
yeah, yeah, there's not a lot of change. And that's going to kind of be their love language. They're going to like to hear that. That's music
Yeah.
to their ears. And then with our C's, they usually love data. So any type of
Hmm.
data that I can bring. And we coach to this. We help sellers identify behavioral styles based on the pace of the person.
Yeah.
So when you
Yep.
know that, that does make your life easier. And I think you're able to speak to everybody in the room because we all have different behavioral styles.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. And when you have a mix of styles in the room, sometimes you're going to have to kind of adjust depending on
Yeah,
how you're directing your message, or just make sure you have those bases covered, right? So you're
100%.
you're able to kind of provide a summary, but hey, I've got the data back, the full data here in this handout, if anybody's interested in seeing it.
Yeah,
If you don't know the styles in advance, leverage your advocate, right? Get some
100%.
insight from them, right? Do these folks, are they more results oriented or relationship oriented? What do you think their key priorities are going to be? How do
Right.
they, what are they most concerned with? That also can give you a clue as to kind of their communication style or their behavior style. So again, leverage those advocates, um, where you can.
100%.
Yeah. What challenges have you had getting other decision makers to appreciate, your goals and solutions?
Mm,
Um, I think that's a great question to
yeah.
ask
Yeah.
your advocate in a way that kind of will bubble up some of these
Right.
preferences and give you some clues as to how to structure your presentation.
Yeah. That's a great question, Jason.
Yeah, I love that. Um, and again, just never underestimate, the importance of being able to present information in a way that your stakeholders and decision makers want to hear it.
Right.
And again, making sure you have those bases covered. Understanding any conflicting priorities. So that was, one of the challenges we talked about up
Yeah.
front, is getting alignment on, differing priorities among stakeholders. So, I'm curious your thoughts on this, Shelley, as to, how do we kind of understand and address those conflicting priorities?
It's asking the questions, you know,
Yep.
it's all about the questions. You know, we say that time and time again, but the more questions, the better questions we ask, we're going to be able
Hmm.
to get this information.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, going back to your advocate, obviously can provide, or advocates, can provide some intel. If you're in front of the buying committee, facilitate a conversation around that. Let's get that out in the open. You
Yeah.
may already
Yeah.
have a sense of what those are, but
Right.
go ahead and ask questions about it in the group, and get it out in the open.
We always ask up front, right? Because when
Right,
you get down to the end, it's going to be too late.
right,
And
right,
it
right.
keeps us from being blindsided
Yeah,
at the end, you know, and
yeah.
when and it's going to make the other person feel important as well. You know, when you're asking those questions, you want to do that to everybody in the room that you can, you know, so they feel like that you are speaking to them and
Mhm.
that your solution is going to help whatever their initiatives are.
Right, right. And I think you hit on something really key there, Shelley, which is get it out in the open, right? Get it out earlier rather than later, because
Yes.
if it pops up at the end, you're dealing with it at some point
Oh,
anyway.
Michelle,
So,
I had this
yeah,
happen to me like seriously, like 2 weeks ago. Um, there, I think it was 36 people were part of this buying committee. It
yeah.
was
Oh
pretty
my
crazy,
goodness.
and I
Yeah.
thought I had it dialed in. And at the end, someone mentioned that he was gonna talk to his silent partner,
Oops.
right?
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you mean? How silent is a silent partner?" I thought I had it all locked in. I thought I
Yeah.
did, but there was a silent partner.
Yeah.
Um, you know, they had to run it by him. It ended up being okay, but I was kicking myself
Right.
afterwards, thinking that I knew all the decision makers. I knew
Right.
everybody. I had the advocates. I was well positioned, and that
Right.
bubbled up at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes, again, you can always do kind of that hindsight is always 2020, but
Yeah, yeah.
ask the questions up front, right?
Right.
Ask the
Right,
questions.
right.
And I think sometimes, sellers don't like to ask those hard questions, or we're worried about what we might hear, right? Something
Yeah,
might bubble up that, we can't address, or something like, but wouldn't you rather hear it up front? So
right.
get these conflicting priorities out, facilitate that conversation around it if you don't have that intelligence coming in. And that way, be prepared to present or position your solution to address as much as possible those priorities, or at least have a conversation around how they would prioritize.
Right.
Um, if there are conflicting priorities, what as a group, how would they rank one, two, three, four?
That's
So at
right.
least you
We
understand.
always say force rank them.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
what's most important.
yeah. Yep, agreed, agreed. So get that out in the open and have that conversation around it. And then, this is kind of what you were just talking about, Shelley, about the silent partner. Prepare your advocate for any meetings that you or your sellers cannot be a part of.
Right.
So if our survey said that 67% of the time, the final purchase decision is made or influenced by someone who is not a member of the buying committee. So there is the silent partner,
Yeah.
or somebody
Yeah.
else out there, right, that
Right.
is not necessarily taking part in the buying committee. And so if you don't have access to that person, you've
Right.
got to rely on your advocates to sell on your behalf.
Yeah. And that can be scary, you know, that could be scary, but I always keep my advocate in the loop of everything that I'm going to present.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I've done like a role play before. I've done here.
I love that. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because we talked
Yeah.
about this when we were
Yeah.
preparing, and I thought that was such a great idea.
Yeah.
So
Because you're leaning on them because they know that no one knows their business than them, right?
yeah,
So I look at it as, look, I want to make sure I'm delivering value, and I've worked hard to put together this solution. Let me run through it with you to make sure that I'm on point.
yeah,
And they're going to give you valuable information when you do that.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
it just makes you better when you practice.
yeah, exactly. And I think that works on the flip side too. So if your advocate is having to sell for you, offer to role play with
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
How can I help you with your presentation?
Right. Right.
Let's talk through common questions and
Yeah.
make sure that they have all of the resources they need to sell on your behalf, but
Yeah.
also offer to kind of role play that presentation.
Sure. Think about what objections could bubble up,
Yep.
so they know how to speak to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so important, I think, to really fully prep as much as possible your advocates to sell on your behalf. And I think that is a common mistake, and a common oversight that we see with sellers, or an area um, that we can all improve on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would love to hear questions from the audience. If you have comments, we've gotten some comments coming in. Would love if you have any questions or comments on this, any experiences that you or your team have had in selling to committees, presenting, especially preparing advocates to sell on your behalf. Would love to get those ideas from you. So for our managers out there, coaching sellers, let's talk about some questions that they need to be asking to make sure that their sellers are truly set up for success when they're selling to committees.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you really know?
yeah,
I'll never forget early in my sales career, we were on the way to a call. I was a newer salesperson, and my manager said, "What recon do you have? What do you know?"
yeah, yeah. I
And
love that.
I was like, didn't know a whole lot at the time, but that taught me something to really,
Yeah,
really try to get as much information as I can.
yeah. Simple question,
Yeah.
but kind of a loaded question, right? What do you really know?
What do you know?
Yeah. Tell me about the account. Tell me about the sales process. Tell me
Right.
about the decision
Yeah.
process, right?
Yeah.
Who are all of the internal advocates? I would also follow up with, how do you know they're internal advocates, right? Why are
Right.
they your advocates, right? Going
Right.
back to that earlier, what we talked about, what's their why, right?
Yeah.
How do what makes you believe that they are internal advocates? Are they
Right.
providing you good
What's in it for
intel?
them ultimately?
100%.
Like
Yep.
you got to think about what's in it for them. Why are they willing to help? And it's often when we ask that question, what's is that going to make their business life better? Could that be a bonus for them?
Yep.
Whatever the result is, we have to understand that because then we
Yep.
can continue to speak to it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. explain the internal buying process. So how well does the salesperson really understand the buying process on the client side?
Right. Right. And I always love to know what that timeline looks like as well,
Yeah,
because sometimes as salespeople, we can be a little impatient, right? We want to constantly be moving the ball forward. But if we know that this could take X amount of time in advance,
right.
then we're able to build more advocates if the sales cycle is really long.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or, going back to, did you know that there was an there was an additional stakeholder that would be weighing in, right? And are you finding that out
Yeah.
late in the process? I need to talk to my
Right.
silent partner, right? Or did you know that up front? Do you understand? Does it need to go through procurement? Does it need to go through legal? What are, um, the entire process, making sure you understand it from start to finish. Joe mentions in the chat, he's chased the wrong dog a few times in his career. Sometimes silent partners come out of nowhere. I started asking who else inside or outside the organization will make the call. So
Yeah.
really asking those questions, who else other than you, of course, is going to be involved in the decision? A very
Yeah.
basic question, but um, can reveal a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sean is asking if anyone's had a client who passes the decision up the ladder to another department or another state or country that provides zero feedback, and is there a way you can reach them?
Mm.
So the decision is being passed again, maybe to the equivalent of a silent partner. Any thoughts on
Right.
that, Shelley, in
Right.
terms of how do you
That's
reach that person?
that's tough, that especially if they're a silent partner, they're usually pretty silent, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
usually hard to find them. It's hard to, what tools do we have at hand that we can find any type of information from them at all?
yeah,
And again,
yeah.
does your advocate know anything about them?
Right. I think that's, to the extent that you can leverage
Hmm.
your advocates, and that's where having multiple advocates and being deeper in an account when you have more contacts, you
Yeah,
can ideally get more intelligence because there's a
yeah,
greater chance that somebody either is in that department or has had contact with them.
yeah.
Um,
Sometimes I always pose the question, if you were in my shoes, what would you do?
yeah,
To my
love
advocate.
that. Yes,
If
yeah,
you're in my shoes, what would you do? I'm asking for their expert opinion, their advice. So if I was trying to reach so and so, how would you do that?
yeah,
What tactics would you use?
yeah. I like that phrasing because it's very like, I mean, the worst they could come back and say is, I have no idea. I don't know this person.
Exactly.
But,
Right.
if you're in
But
my
they
shoes,
may
you know
think
the
about it.
company.
Yeah.
Right,
They may say, well,
right.
you may want to try so and so because they communicate with them quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I like that kind of, like I said, I like that phrasing.
Mm,
Another suggestion that I might have, if it's going up the ladder, if you can identify maybe the role of that person or the level within the
mm,
organization, you could maybe if possible, try to orchestrate a peer-to-peer type contact. So
sure.
maybe, if it's someone at the vice president level, maybe there's, your VP of sales could help reach out or your CSO or,
Right. I love
someone at
that
the
peer to
equivalent.
peer. Or
Yeah.
sometimes we say chief to chief,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Exactly.
listen,
Yes.
chief to
Yeah.
chief.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's that level of respect there, right? So
Yeah.
I love that. I loved doing that when I was challenged with that, bringing in leadership on my end.
I agree. Yes, I agree. And we had a comment here is understanding um, kind of going back and kind of looking back at the process up to that point, um, a work back structure that is co-built with the client to kind of understand the decision makers. Maybe even asking questions around how decisions like this have been made in the past. Maybe that this
Right.
person had to be when the decision was taken up the ladder to this person? What were the
Yeah.
priorities? Um, what was the basis of the decision? How did the decision go? Just trying to do some intelligence there might
Yeah.
help. It may not help you necessarily get in front of him or her, um, but it might help you at least structure some communication or be able to structure kind of the value construct of your offering that
Sure.
would appeal. Yeah.
Not- uh-uh.
And finally, what is the kind of going back to our questions that sales managers need to ask? What is the most important thing they value?
Yeah, that is huge because when we can deliver that and speak to that,
Yeah,
we're going to get more information.
yeah,
We're
exactly.
we're just going to get more information. We're when we can speak to what's important to them and how we can help, that's when we're going to have great conversations.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. So again, what do you know? What do you really know? Who are the advocates? Explain the internal buying process. What is the most important thing they value? Some other questions I would recommend. What types of touch points have you had with your advocate? So, how are you positioned in the account,
Yeah,
right? We
right.
talk a lot about, are you a salesperson? Are you a business expert? Are you a strategic resource? So
Sure.
how does the seller feel like they are positioned? Why do they feel that way? So kind of do a gut check on that positioning. How have you prepared your advocate for the presentation? So if your advocate is having to sell on their behalf, who are we up against, right? So
Yeah.
from a competitive perspective, some other questions there. Sean's comment, I'm sure they do this on purpose to cut out any additional influence. They do not answer phone calls or emails at this level.
Mm.
So again, then I would go back to number of how are
Yeah.
your advocates selling on your behalf? How are they
How can we bring them
um,
in on our team?
right? Yeah, yeah. And I
Right?
would stay in touch with your existing contacts and advocates, kind of going back to that building trust. So
Right.
um, having regular touch points with them, bringing value, asking questions, making sure that they have everything that they need.
Right.
So let's talk about the top don'ts. So what not to
Oh,
do when you are selling to multiple stakeholders
oh.
and committees, right? So some good
Don't
ones here,
assume.
Shelley.
Don't
Don't
assume.
assume,
Don't assume. I was like, oh, they know me so well. I know them from so and so. We're
right?
tight. We're good. Am I
Yep.
really?
Yeah. Right. Am I really? Well,
Right?
you can be right. You can have a good relationship. Doesn't mean you're going
Yeah.
to win the deal, right?
Right,
So
right,
that
right.
that assumption that a good relationship will, with an advocate especially,
Oh,
but that relationship will translate into a closed sale.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you've there's no substitute for effective selling. You've got to still have a solution that meets their wants and needs. You
Sure.
need to be able to articulate the value,
Right.
understand their needs and wants.
Just
Um,
because you guys have had lunch together, broke bread together, doesn't mean that
exactly.
you're bringing the value that they need.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we see this a lot that you equate, they love us. I have a great relationship. And then you get outsold or they go with
Right.
someone else. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
going through the sales process, being effective, having effective selling skills throughout. There's just no substitute for that.
Right.
Yeah. Don't go rogue or go behind your advocate's back. And Shelley, I know you've got a
Mhm.
story here.
Well, it's just it's very typical in the media business to do this. So oftentimes a client that I'm presenting a solution for has an advertising agency, and the advertising agency can bless it. You know, they like to look at the
Mhm.
metrics, they like to look at the creative, and if I would early in my career, if I was getting resistant from the ad agency, I would just go right around them and go to the client and spend my time with the client. And sure, I'd get information from them, but then I'd get my hand slapped because there was protocol in the
Right.
process.
Right.
And yeah, you got to respect the protocol because it can come around and bite you if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the fastest way to alienate your advocate. The person
Right.
that you're counting on to give you good competitive intelligence,
Yeah,
to advocate on your behalf. Going around them just kind of destroys that
right, right.
relationship.
And like I said, oftentimes as sellers, we get impatient, right? We want to move the
Mhm.
deal forward. We want to be able to get the information we need. And we have to understand our advocate has other duties.
Yeah,
They have other responsibilities.
yeah.
Um, so we have to respect that and understand that, sometimes we always have to be patient. And
Hmm.
their priorities are not always in line with my priorities, if that makes sense.
Right.
So take a deep breath. Don't go rogue.
Right. Again, it's got to be a win-win, right? We talked
Yeah.
about that. It's, what's in it for you, what's in it for them as well. And going behind their back is the best way to destroy that trust that you're trying
Yeah.
to build up.
Yeah. Jason has a comment. One question to ask, is there a normal standard process for the decision-making process? If no matter what, um, if no, what makes the decision different? If yes, how does the contact receive feedback? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Jason,
think
that's
that's for Sean's situation, and I think that's a great question to ask. I think
yeah.
that's a great question for sellers to use just in general when you are asking about the buying process. If you find out there is um, a silent partner, right? That
Right.
or someone that else that is going to be making the decision. Ask some questions around that.
Yeah.
I think those are great questions.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads us to our next don't, which is assuming that every internal process works the same way. So if company A makes decisions one way, then company B must make decisions
And
the exact same way.
I hate to say this, but I find that sometimes the most seasoned sellers believe this
Yeah,
because they've been there, done that. I've been
right.
doing this so long. I know, I know, I know, I know. And
Yes.
again, we can't assume because businesses change, organizations change, leadership changes, things are done differently. So just because the internal process was this way a couple of years ago, let's not assume that it's the same.
Yeah, exactly. Again, there's no substitute for effective selling. Ask those questions. Ask about roles. Ask about priorities. Ask about the process.
Yeah.
Make sure you or your sellers are doing their due diligence in every account,
Hmm.
for every sales opportunity.
Right.
And of course, this one, Shelley, don't just check in and ask for a status
That
update.
is such a waste of someone else's time.
Yeah,
And honestly, if they had the feedback, they would probably already contact you.
yeah,
So
yes,
I connect with them. I'm not
yeah,
saying don't connect with them. Connect with them with value. Give them something that you believe would help them, that help them
yeah,
understand your solution better. But continue to connect with them. And in this day and age, there's multiple ways to do that. So,
yeah. Agreed.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
I like the LinkedIn platform because oftentimes we can share content that we see with somebody that we know, um, just to let them know that their business is top of mind for you,
yeah,
and that's going to
yeah.
make them feel valued.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, like differentiate how you show up, how you interact with your contacts, with your advocates, um, differentiates you. So when we talk about differentiating your solution or differentiating from a competitor, never forget that your sellers are a differentiation. So how you show up, how you interact can be just as important
Yes,
as your solution itself, all things being equal, right? So if you have
correct.
an equivalent solution, your relationships, how you build those advocates can be a big differentiator. So I agree. Bring value, set those next
Mm,
appointments. Make sure that you are working with your advocate and preparing them
yeah,
for to sell on your behalf.
right. We've got another
Yeah.
question in the chat. What do you do if your advocate leaves the company during the sales cycle? You know,
Great question.
That's another reason to have more than one advocate.
Right,
Right. Right.
right.
And
Yes.
again, so your contact leaves, right?
Hmm.
What harm is it going to do for you to reach out to them? Hey, what's going on? Where are you? What's next in your career? So if you were me, who should I connect with internally?
Yeah,
You've got nothing to lose at that point,
exactly.
right?
Yes.
And oftentimes businesses within certain categories, within most, you know, people hop around. They go to another, so you'll keep that advocate close to you. Find out what their next opportunity is, where they're going.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good point. That's kind of a two-pronged purpose there. Number one,
Yeah.
contact that advocate. Again, if you were me, love that phrasing. If you were me, who would you contact? Who should I be working with
Right.
in your old account, right? But
Yeah.
also keep that relationship for the future. You never know when they may have a need. They may send you a referral. Um, but to your point,
Yeah.
all the more reason to have more than one advocate within an account.
Right.
And I would also encourage you to keep cultivating any existing relationships that you have within that account. So maybe your advocate leaves, who else can become an advocate for your
Sure.
on your behalf? Is there someone that's friendly, that is tipping your way, or that if you've got an adversary in an account, you're probably not going to move them from adversary to advocate, but you may be able to move somebody that is open to consideration to an
Yeah.
advocate.
Listen to Joe. Go
Yeah,
wide, go deep, and go up.
absolutely.
Amen. We say that
Absolutely.
all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Another comment, Jason was saying, never assume your customer understands their own internal process.
Right?
You'd be surprised, right? I have seen that happen as well, Jason. So you are correct. You should never assume that the customer understands it, but it's still worth asking the questions. Um, maybe the customer doesn't have, or your contacts don't have full insight. But if you ask those questions and you continue to ask those questions as you are getting wider and deeper and higher within an account, perhaps you can get that fuller
Mm,
picture.
yeah.
Great questions and
Wow.
comments.
A lot of
So
great information.
it is. So a couple of resources here. If you are interested in our survey results, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar, we did a survey around selling to multiple stakeholders and buying committees. There's a QR code here to download an infographic with all of that data. If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you'd like to learn more, a lot of what we have talked about today is part of our sales training programs. So if you'd like to learn more, feel free to scan that QR code to get in touch with us. So we've had a packed hour. We've
Yeah.
talked about understanding organizational dynamics, right? Really understanding the account and the
Yeah.
stakeholders within it, building trust with advocates. We've
Yeah.
talked about coaching questions and really how to understand kind of the buying process and making sure that you are getting wider and deeper and higher within an account. We've also
And
talked
not
about those
checking in.
goals and not checking
Not just
in.
checking in, please.
If you
Bring
take one
value.
thing away, that's right. If you take one thing away from our time together
Do
today,
not check
don't
in.
just check in. Bring value at every interaction. Oh, goodness. Shelley, thank you so much for joining
Oh my
today.
gosh,
I
this
have,
is fun, Michelle. Thank
yeah,
you.
enjoyed our conversation. Thank you to our audience
Yeah, love
for
all the
your
comments.
comments and your questions. I really appreciate the interaction. Again, scan those QR codes if you're interested in the infographic or getting in touch with us. And we appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you so much, Shelley.
Thanks.